Okay, I call this special City Council work session to order. Once again, as a gentle reminder, the reason we call it special is because it's not a regularly scheduled council meeting, which is the second and fourth Thursdays of every month. Having said that, may we have roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Truitt.
I'm here.
Vice Mayor Villanueva.
Here.
Councilmember Longabaugh.
Here.
Councilmember Alton.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Hall. Here. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to item number 1.
Thank you very much. And this is a presentation regarding development review streamlining presented by Community Development Director Jeff Mihalik.
Mayor Truitt, members of City Council, good afternoon. We're here to present to you some ideas, but more importantly, to gain some feedback from you all this afternoon regarding our development review process. Several months ago, we created an internal staff committee with representation from every single department in the city that has a hand in reviewing development matters to really take a really hard and critical look at our development review process. As a result of that, I have some good news for you and also some ideas for opportunities in the future. The good news is the process really isn't broken. I think the resultant development out in the community is actually quite good, but we do have significant opportunities to streamline our development review process, to create ways to save money, and to bring these businesses to market much more quickly and therefore generating additional revenues for the city. Frankly, the challenge right now is our process is very complicated. It includes a series of disjointed reviews that are sequential, and that really slows down the process. An example is the Asante project, as I'm sure you're all familiar with. Asante was actually broken up into 75, that's right, 75 individual processes, and it took several years for that project to move forward. And that is a challenge. We can really make that much more streamlined and much more efficient by doing a number of things. Right now we use an internal process called a Technical Advisory Committee or a TAC committee. What we would like to do is to use and recommend to you a streamlined plan development process instead. That process would include 4 simple steps, and we'd be able to use the same steps for every single development. It would include a concept review, a preliminary review, a final review, which would lead directly into construction. Using that type of process that wouldn't rely heavily on a TAC process, we'd be able to review plans within 15 working days. Again, 15 working days instead of a process that typically takes 40 to 60 days. The other thing that we'd like to suggest to you is the implementation of idea that the council brought up during your retreat several months ago, and that's the use of an ombudsman. We think that's a very good idea. My understanding is that your concept was to really identify one individual person that would shepherd one project from start all the way through finish. We think that's a very good idea. What we would recommend to you is to identify one member of our Development Services Division gets assigned an individual case, like Asante, for example. That's their singular point of contact. Whenever they have a question or a concern or even a complaint, they go to that one person. Now, granted, that one person may not be able to answer a complicated engineering question, architectural question, whatever, but the individual would be able to be responsible for getting the answers to that person. This way, a developer, a builder would not have to shop for answers or keep making phone call after phone call after phone call. The appeal process wouldn't go through a number of layers. If the ombudsman wouldn't be able to help them directly, then they would come directly to me, and I would make a determination on how to move forward. If I'm unavailable, then it would go to the assistant city manager. So there wouldn't be a lot of layers of review. They would get their answers immediately. So we would implement that right away. We're also recommending that you group or bundle entitlement actions. What I mean by that is right now we have a sequential process where you will see annexation, and then a couple months later you might see rezoning, a couple months later site plan, and so on. It really stretches out the time frame. I'm recommending to you that you bundle those together and see them at one time. A good example is just the other night at the Planning and Zoning Commission, they were reviewing a conditional use permit, and just the conditional use permit for a new gas station. Okay? They had concerns and questions about the site plan, but it wasn't on their agenda. They had concerns and questions about the plat of subdivision, but it wasn't on their agenda. They were sequential. They would come at different times or go to different bodies. My recommendation to you for clarity and to get good input is to bundle those types of projects all together. So that really leads us to the first question. We'd like some feedback from you, and that is, are you comfortable and in agreement with multiple entitlement actions like zoning, site plan, and plat of subdivision, all coming forward to you on one agenda?
Yes, I am, very much so.
That's great.
Because on P and Z, when I was on P and Z, we had questions that I wanted to go back to a site plan, or had a question on the site plan, and that, we talked about that 2 months ago, and it wasn't on the agenda. I think it should all come together so that we can evaluate the whole arc. I just think that's a fabulous idea. That's my opinion.
Sounds like an opportunity to be more responsive to applicants and also staff getting the information in a timely fashion.
Once, I will say this, once we get the input this evening, then what we will actually do is go back and amend what we need to amend in the code and ordinances, and then we'll bring it back for consideration at the first meeting in January.
Another question very related to the bundling is really the entitlement actions that council does want to consider and doesn't feel it's necessary to consider. A specific question has been raised about conditional use permits. At your tables this evening, and we emailed it to you, there was a list of the entitlement actions. I'll review them very quickly. The items that go to both, again, both Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council include general plan amendments, PADs, rezonings. Items that just go to council include annexations, subdivision plats, and development agreements. Items that just go to the Planning and Zoning Commission include conditional use permits. And we're asking if you'd like to make any changes to those considerations by either body.
Is there a reason that, and Joe, you've been around longer, is there a reason that the CUP is approved by Planning and Zoning and doesn't come to the City Council? Was there a good reason for that, or?
I don't know of any. I actually would like them to see I would like to see them come to City Council. The only way right now, I believe, is if they're appealed to us. And I would rather see them come directly to us. The site plans, I don't know, we changed it on ours. Now it says on these handouts, it just says site plans, not minor or major site plan amendments. Site plans are pretty much just the organization of structures on a piece of property. Mm-hmm. And if you've got a bigger building, where that's going on a piece of property and where the parking is and where they're located, I think is relatively important to our citizens. So site plans also, I mean, not coming to us, I don't like that idea. I don't like anything not coming to us, actually, because at the end of the day, they're advisory committees, and if stuff doesn't come before us, I don't know. I'm not keen on those ideas. I'd rather see all of them come to us.
Just a couple points. One is Planning and Zoning Commission is a very valuable tool to this city. And I recognize, and I know all of us that have been on Planning and Zoning recognize that there's a lot of education that takes place for the commissioners, and that the commissioners actually go out in the field and look at the site plans and the sites and determine, based on what they see and who they're talking to in the neighborhoods, what they believe is going to be the best solution for both our residents and for the applicant. So I just don't see where the council has that kind of time to go out and do that type of homework and get that, be educated in those ways when we should be dealing with policy issues. With a slower economy, of course, everybody's got a little bit of extra time now, but as things pick up, there's no way we could keep up with it. And so I would be concerned about council taking on or relieving the planning and zoning of those additional responsibilities.
Mayor Chert, if I could also add just something to keep in mind is we are looking to streamline wherever possible. If council wants to consider these additional things such as conditional use permits or site plans, it will add to the review time, at least 2 weeks, sometimes 4 to 6 weeks if they're continued, and there is an added cost to the developer. Just want to lay that out as some things to consider.
See, and that's a good reason, even in a slow time, we want to be competitive, and so we don't want to add additional weeks to the process for an applicant. As long as we feel confident that our Planning and Zoning Commission is doing the job that we've selected them to do and that they're getting the training that we know you're giving them, then I would hope that we could be confident in their decisions. And one more thing is their decisions they're not so subjective. They have very objective criteria by which they have to make their decisions, and that is going by single, family design guidelines, or commercial design guidelines, the code, and other tools that they have to use in order to make those types of decisions.
Through the chair. I mean, site plans, like I said, at that point, they're pretty well set. It's just building location and parking layouts and stuff like that. So I'm not too concerned with that one. But conditional use permits, and like I said, with all due respect, I think it's part of our job. A conditional use permit is exactly that. They're asking for some sort of different use or not a non-common use in a particular area of the city. And I feel that's important enough to come before us, and I think it should. I'm not saying it shouldn't go before the P&Z committee, and I'm not insinuating that they don't know and they're not educated, and I'm never going to insinuate that. They work hard and they study also. I'm just saying that all the council members here know that we don't always agree with what advisory committees determine. So with that said, I think conditional use permits, site plans, but conditional use permits, I'd be pretty adamant that I think those should come before us. That's just my humble opinion.
Sure.
Jeff, is there a major and minor conditional use permits? Is there some big ones and there's some little ones, and is there a preponderance of little ones versus big ones?
Yeah.
How would you equate that?
Yeah, the current code does not differentiate at all any degrees of complexity in conditional use permits that allow us to do minor, major. We'd certainly take a look at that. We could come up with some standards that might provide you with the opportunity to review it if it's a certain acreage, if it includes multiple drive-through uses and so on. Conditional use permits, the reason for them are to really look at individual land uses which create special externalities, meaning traffic, lighting, unique uses that may need extra conditions to control them. That's what conditional use permits are all about. So it's difficult to differentiate between major and minor, but we could certainly put some information together for you to consider. Another option would be, if council is concerned about it, is to make sure that when a conditional use permit does come on file and is filed with Community Development Department, that we put you on notice as soon as possible. That will provide council at least the opportunity to look into it, investigate it on their own, call the ombudsman, find out the particulars of it. That would be a way for you to be involved in it and understand it without actually having to review it and therefore delaying it. Just an idea.
Does the P&Z Commission, and having served on the P&Z, I was not aware of this, but do they have the capability of referring a conditional use permit up to the council?
I'm not aware that they do right now.
Okay. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the P&Z. Their job is pretty significant, and pretty much what they say goes, unless it's being appealed, and then it goes to our Board of Appeals that the council used to do, but now we have other people going to be doing that. And so I respect their capabilities, and also listening to Councilman Johnson, there are probably some items that need to come to us, and we have to have an open door. So therefore, possibly we can work up an agreement with the P&Z that they have the ability to refer something on to the council should they deem it necessary.
Anybody else? I think that seems like a good suggestion. Yeah.
We can, one of the things is to come up with the details of that referral process. Councilmember Alden, is what you're thinking then if the P&Z board, the council would receive the item only if the P&Z board referred it to the council?
Exactly, but I think that we need to do some discussions with P&Z and let them know typically what we would be interested in seeing. And they would be cognizant of that, and then be able to, without any discussion on their part, or after some discussion, is to refer the item on to council. if they deem it necessary.
So is the consensus of the council then that we take it back to the P and Z board?
I do have a question. On the previous discussion with regards to site plans, we talked about timing. And can you give us an idea of what a process like that might mean in terms of timing on a CUP?
Conditional use permit will come in, if we streamline it, eliminating the TAC process as we're suggesting, that could actually get to the Planning and Zoning Commission within 21 days, frankly, depending on when the public hearing is held. If it went to council, then there would be at least another, 2 to 5 week process after that.
2 to 5 weeks?
Yes.
If they came directly to us, it'd be the same amount of time as going to the P and Z, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, if it doesn't go to them and it comes to us directly, there's no delay. It's the same time frame as it went directly to P and Z. Okay.
Randy?
Can I ask one question, Councilmember Johnson? So under the scenario you're suggesting then is it wouldn't go to P and Z or would go to P and Z at the same time?
I don't see, excuse me, I don't see, like I said, I don't see, because normally if they get declined, they're going to come to us anyway. That's what I've seen, or at least the two that I've seen. If they got denied, they come to council anyway, and it's delayed anyhow. And in both instances, the council overturned what the P and Z committee suggested. So it took time away from the process anyway. So if they came directly to us, we make the final call regardless, because they can come to us, they can appeal it to us anyhow, right?
Here's my question is,
Am I correct, Michael?
I don't think so. I don't think, first of all, the appeal goes to the Board of Adjustments.
Which doesn't come back to us.
That's right. That's correct.
Yeah, it goes to the Board of Adjustments. And is it appealable on a CUP?
No, we put a committee together.
We were.
My understanding is it is. Board of Adjustment would review appeals for rezonings and conditional use permits, site plans. They're always the first review body.
And isn't that in part why we created the Board of Adjustments?
Yes, sir.
And if it goes to Board of Adjustments, from a timing standpoint, what does it look like?
Yeah, there's a couple-week process because it has to be advertised in the newspaper for a certain number of weeks. So I would say if it is appealed, it's going to take a couple more weeks to get that through the process.
Okay.
I can't recall many times at all, certainly since I've been here, that any of those appeals have gone forward. So,
Can I propose maybe a different idea? We know in advance that a CUP is coming forward. Is it possible that we could include it in the city manager's weekly report, that the CUP request a little bit of background information, so that if the council really had a concern about it, we could either get those concerns addressed before it goes to P&Z, or we could say that we would like to see it come to council?
Yes, Jeff and I talked about that possibility. What we would suggest is rather than putting it actually in that, to make it so you're on the actual distribution for those. And we'll put everybody on the distribution so you can look at it. I think many of you, if not maybe all of you, are on that distribution right now. But make sure you're on that. If there's one that we're aware of an issue that may come up, we do try to update you in the issues update. But, again, we may not be aware of all the issues.
Okay, now, let's take that a couple steps further. We receive the notification of a potential CUP coming forward, and we call and get information, do whatever investigations we want to do, and one or more of us is unhappy or concerned about the potential outcome of the approval of a CUP. Is it at that time that we can have a process where we can then bring it to council? Telling the applicant there are concerns at the council level, and this is going to delay your permit by X amount of weeks?
I'd have to give that process some thought. I'm not familiar with anything like that. I don't know if Michael has anything
We would
about
have,
that.
with what you're proposing, we'll have to vet it out. One of the concerns is, in that regard, is we're starting to change somewhat the regulation on landowners. Prop 207 prevents us from that. Also, dependent upon the decisions, typically with conditional use permits, there are objective factors that you determine, and what we're interjecting in here is more of subjective factors, which can be arbitrary and capricious. And so just by the fact of a council making the decision, we would like to consider this item,
Yeah.
that may be deemed arbitrary and capricious. So we would need to vet some of that stuff out before we solidified this.
Okay, and one of the things that I think we all would agree on, whether we agree on the outcome of this or not, is that we don't want to be onerous with our applicants, is that we want to be a city where people can do business.
Right.
Through you, Chair. Conditional use permit is an over and above what normal application process is.
That's correct.
All right. I see no harm in delaying that or extending that process if it in fact is over and above the normal permitting process. So I have no empathy for somebody who's asking for something out of the normal to be delayed 1 or 2 weeks as a result of that request.
Mayor Truitt, one thing as we go through, we have a few more questions to ask of you to get policy direction. With the bundling process and also with, if we get positive feedback from council, we're going to ask developers to submit a little bit more information up front. And I think that will provide council, planning and zoning commission with more ideas, more concepts on these processes as they go through. My recommendation to you is to, let the streamlining go forward with the entitlement actions as they are, kind of test it for a year or so. And then if you're still uncomfortable as a group with how the process is going through, if it's delayed or you think it's fine to add a couple weeks, then come back and look at it again. I just wouldn't recommend at this point that you tweak it this early on without seeing all the other adjustments that we're planning on making.
For me, that seems like a reasonable compromise with the understanding that you will still be sending out the information to individual councilors, so if they have questions, they can ask those questions. If they want to do any of their own investigation, they can do that as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah. If we're concerned about a CUP, Michael, we can speak as a resident of Surprise, right, at the P&Z hearing?
As a general statement, yes, you can speak and address your concerns. However, if there's a shift in the scheme that we're using where you may be an appellate body, it would be my recommendation that you not do that, because then you'd be considering it on its merits.
I guess the one thing I want to make sure of before we move forward on this issue is do we have a consensus? I've not heard from enough members to tell me that there is one at this point.
I think, my personal opinion is I think we ought to leave the CUP process the way it is with P&Z, but also I like the idea of us having a heads up, giving us notice that that's going to be heard. I like that.
Having gone through a couple of the appeals that we went through last year or so, I think that having set up the Board of Adjustment was a good idea to try to get that away from us, and it depoliticizes it, in my opinion. It gets it away from the political body. We appointed a group of people who could look at that and professionally review it for us. And so I'd like to stay the same. I agree with Jeff. I think we'll stay where it is, at least for a year or so, and let him come back and give us a report on how it's going.
Any significant objections to that?
Well, what John Longenbaugh just said was contrary to what Skip Hall just said. So I think what we have, I like the idea of the city manager's report give us an update as to what major CUPs are coming into place. Okay, and then it's up to us. If we deem it necessary to bring it to put it on an agenda, and you have 2 people that want to assign it, then let it be. However, but I think that we should. The consensus would be is that the items get reported on the city manager's report.
Okay, what I heard earlier is that the request was for 1 year period of time, give you the opportunity to show us that that'll work in the existing form with the addition of notification, advance notification of council. That's what I heard.
Yes, sir.
That is exactly what I thought I said.
Okay.
I'm sorry if it sounded different.
Let's move on.
Richard, the next issue is really bringing entitlement requests more quickly to the Planning and Zoning Commission and to City Council. Right now, as I mentioned before, there's an internal TAC review process where plans are submitted to staff. There's a great deal of review, and the plans go back and forth until the plans are almost perfect before they're brought to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. That can take, frankly, weeks, months before the Planning and Zoning Commission sees it and Council sees it. What we're recommending to you is that when the developer submits the plans, we have the concept review at a staff level to talk about the general parameters of it. We provide them with a CD with all of our development specifications. We're very clear on the expectations of the council and the board. They go away, work on their plans, and they submit them. We do the one-time review with all staff members doing it, and then we recommend approval to the Planning and Zoning Commission and Council with conditions, which is a little bit different the way you do it now. Now, the condition list could be lengthy, okay? But it's a process that I've used all over the country and it works real well. There are times, however, I have to forewarn you, where the project comes back and it's still not in any shape or form that we'd feel comfortable going forward with you. But in most cases, we could do a 15-day review, come up with a list of stipulations or conditions for approval, and then bring it forward to the commission and board later on. Developers should like that because they don't have to go back and forth changing plans. It'll go quicker. It'll also save them money. The trick for us, and it puts more pressure on staff, but that's okay, is to make sure that when the plans are ultimately approved by council, and we have the list of, let's just say, 20 conditions, that every single one of those conditions are ultimately changed in the final plans. So our question to you is, are you comfortable with us streamlining the process, bringing it forward to you more quickly with a conditional approval?
You're actually coming to us in approving a concept that, given everything that you have recommended and the stipulations that you're making, if they're all done, then it's a satisfactory project to the city.
That's correct.
That works for me.
Me too.
As long as we have some good follow-up by the city.
Right.
Because then we lose control.
Right, and on the other side of that, I agree with Mr. Alton. On the other side is that is we also don't want that to be a frustration list for those who are trying to work in our city. We want to make sure that it's clearly delineated what the expectations are, and as long as they meet them, it's going to go like this.
Could I ask one question, and that is, how do we, is it a 15-day process? Mm-hmm. How does that compare to the rest of the cities in the valley?
Yeah, every city, frankly, is much different. There are communities, and I haven't studied extensively, frankly, but there are cities that take weeks, months to process things. There are other communities that process things in a matter of weeks, but you got to look at the quality of the development out in the field.
Sure.
And that's the key, is the outcome, frankly.
So this is something that will put us, the city of Surprise, a step ahead?
It could give us a competitive advantage, absolutely.
Very good. Thank you.
And then that would include too, Jeff, the ombudsman,
Yes,
one point of contact.
point of contact, that's correct.
That's excellent.
The last issue we have is asking developers to provide to us a little bit more information up front. The concern that the committee had is regarding really rezonings more than anything else. Right now, our requirements for submittal documents for zoning matters is pretty scant, in my opinion. The biggest challenge for us is that when a member of the public comes to a zoning hearing, we only have very conceptual plans. We don't really know how many buildings, what type of building, how the landscaping, and so on. We're not going to ever be in a position where a developer or property owner is going to be able to say the specific use, the end user, the retailer. That's not the decision. But we should be provided with some standards for development, whether they're architectural, landscaping, buffering, access, and so on. So we are asking through this process for the developers to spend a little bit more time and money up front on providing us information for items like rezoning. So we want to make sure you're comfortable with that.
Okay.
How is that being accepted by the developer, or how will it be accepted?
Well, that's kind of part of my closing after we ended up with this question. After I got some initial feedback from council this evening, we were going to set up very quickly a committee representing of attorneys, engineers, developers, let them know about our streamlining process, let them know about what your feedback was tonight, and say, what do you think of it, and get their feedback, and then bring it back to council as a formal amendment.
Good.
Sounds good.
Excuse me, Jeff, when you're not dealing with a developer and you're dealing with a resident that wants to add a couple of rooms, how long does it take for that process?
Yeah. That process is completely different than the entitlement process. That's a simple building permit. What we're trying to do, and this is more on a customer service level, Councilman Villanueva, is to have one-on-one meetings with the property owner and say, what exactly do you want to do? Bring them into a conference room, sit them down and say, what do you want to do? Instead of having it in the public out on a counter, you want to sit down and say, you want to make a room addition? Have you thought about electric, plumbing, and so forth and so on? Assign a building inspector and a plans examiner to that one particular property owner and work through the process.
Okay.
Now, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Haven't we just recently advertised that it's a 3-day turnaround?
3-day turnaround for custom home permits. And that's working well.
For a
right now.
custom home?
Yes.
And how about a permit for an add-on of a bedroom or?
Mother-in-law quarters or?
Yeah, it frankly depends on the complexity. We do it as quickly as we can. And many times we're able to provide permits over the counter. Depends on what they bring in. It depends on the complexities of the project itself.
Okay.
The difficulty sometimes when people that bring permits in, you have somebody that brings a concept in on the back of a shopping bag that they've drawn that they want to add, and it becomes very hard from a building perspective. I mean, from a building perspective, you'd ideally like to see an engineered set of drawings that are stamped, okay? And there's a balancing act there. But so what I guess I'm saying is you can get a wide range of quality, and because of the wide range of quality, that can affect how much work is going to have to be required to get there.
Mitch, with the last example I'll give you, because this is a very good one. It's my first week on the job here in Surprise. The gentleman called me and said, I want to get a building permit for a garage, and they won't give it to me. I just want to build a garage. What's the big deal? Thought the same thing. What's going on? Well, I find out that the gentleman, and he had all good intentions. He wanted to build a garage that was twice the size of his home. Okay. He wanted to make it 2-story. He wanted to do welding out there, so he wanted to up the electrical service, and it just happened to be in the floodplain. So, I mean, those types of issues can make it more complex. There's not a good one-size-fits-all, but my job with community development is to make sure we provide good customer service and to smooth things out wherever possible. Okay.
Thank you.
So the only thing I have to end with is we're going to go ahead and move forward then with the stakeholders to have input from them. Our goal is to, with the opening of the new city hall, is to have a one-stop shop and to do the streamlining from there on out. Okay?
Super. Thank you very much. Now, I know that Mr. Williams needs to leave us in just a couple minutes, and I'm going to go out of order here. I have a special proclamation that I would like to read. Proclamation. Whereas we recognize reporters are a necessary evil and could have done worse than Tony Lombardo, and whereas Tony Lombardo is leaving us for the greener but far less interesting and more saintly pastures of Washington, D.C., and we, the Mayor and Council of the City of Surprise, in all seriousness, do hereby confer this certificate of thanks upon Tony Lombardo for his commitment to accuracy, fairness, and objectivity in his reporting of city issues these past 2.5 years, and his dedication to mastering the complexities of municipal government for which this council and all Surprise residents owe him a debt of gratitude. We will be taking a 5-minute break so that we can go out and take a photo with Mr. Lombardo presenting this proclamation to him. So 5-minute break, folks. Council.
Wait, John, you have to go.
We have 1 minute to meeting. And I think you have a couple of additional statements.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. Discussion with Arts and Cultural Advisory Board regarding the arts and surprise. First of all, I don't believe that the rest of the Arts Commission has met the two new members who are here to join you. They are Cynthia Nieto and Manuel Hernandez in the back of the room. And we would like for you to come up and join your committee, please.
Yeah, just bring up a couple chairs and sit right with the committee, please.
They have both been, I'm sorry, Richard, they've both been officially sworn in, so they're active members.
Thank you.
Good.
That's fine.
Might need another one.
We enjoyed ourselves.
Okay, good evening.
Hi. I'm Christy Miller. I am the chair of the Arts Board. I'll give you the run through of the rest of everybody real quick. Valerie Hagenbush over there is vice chair. A little wave. Sandra Staley. Larry Mann's not with us tonight. Jim Biendo is hiding in the corner. Dorothy Reeve. And Joanna Ciccone-Mankiewicz, she's not here with us either. These are our ex officio members. Kate Cox is from the Herd West, I'm sure you know, and Julie Richard from West Valley Arts Council. And, of course, Kathy, our famous liaison. All right. We have put together a quick little PowerPoint to just bring up some general questions that we have as far as direction goes and emphasis and that kind of thing. First of all, we just put in a couple of, just a few quotes here about the benefits of public art so that we can all kind of be on the same page. I'm just going to point out that the second one is about how much money public art brings in, just, FYI. But the other ones are more about benefit to people, education, and that kind of thing. Also, you should have received an attachment, too, with another statement that talks about it's more like kind of a case, a cause for the public arts that you could read at your leisure sometime.
Did you get it?
Yeah, this one right here.
It's at the very end, it should be.
Oh, okay.
The mission statement of the board is to encourage cultural growth and surprise and to ensure that art, culture, and entertainment are central elements of the quality of life for Surprise residents. To this end, the board will encourage the development of cultural opportunities and resources as well as the creative, social, and community benefits they provide. So far,
Go ahead.
So far, we have, in the last couple of years, worked on the following projects. Via Con Dios, which is the monument that's there out in front of the library, the mural wall that's on the library itself, the tree of the big tree of life with the book, as well as the benches that go around the lake there. Currently, Joe Tyler's installing the nice, huge metal monument outside the fire station. Public Works building is getting several treatments right now, many treatments as a matter of fact, and of course City Hall is getting 2 major pieces of installation right now. Those are things that have already been approved either by previous councils or by yourselves for as far as City Hall goes. Things that we have been working on and things that we have done over the last couple of years where this money has gone. Talking about money, as I'm sure you're aware, the money that comes to the Art Board is 1% of capital improvements for above-ground structures. Now, this fiscal year, obviously, we don't have any capital projects coming up, so we're not going to be receiving any money as of now. However, we do still have money in our budget, so we are still hoping to do a few more things, specifically with City Hall and anybody else that puts in a request. To my knowledge, anybody that would like art at their building, this money is provided there for them. We'll just, kind of help them pick the right people, the right artists, the right kind of things, and help them work through that. So the question, obviously the first question becomes, is 1% that is allocated, is this the right amount of money? Is this a good amount the board that feels, the board is obviously very comfortable with this amount. Of course, we'd like to see it like 20, 30%. But, what does the council think about this percentage and the idea of how this comes?
Okay, I think that was more than a rhetorical question, right? You'd like to get
Yes,
some
it definitely
input?
was not. Right. When, of course, it's the buildings built in the city, right, by the city.
So, any thoughts?
Yeah, just a quick question on the 1%, just to use it as an example on a new city hall. With the art that's coming in, was there a shortfall, money was left over? Or
Well, that's kind of a complicated question because there was not a shortfall, but there are only 2 pieces of art so far being installed. Originally, we had this concept that there would be, the way that this property is set up would be beautiful for like a small sculpture garden outdoor, a great amphitheater for kids to meet or different people to come. Those kinds of things could be sponsored. The architect actually mentioned to us that the parking garage could use some art, maybe perhaps a waterfall or something like that, because then, it'd make it seem a little bit more friendly and more inviting than just a parking garage. Now, those things obviously would require more money, and so we would run out. So the reason that we have only done 2 things for City Hall is because we don't want to, spend all of our money at once. So is it too little? Not necessarily. Do we want more? Of course. But do we have to have more? No. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Did I understand you right when I think you said that public art actually increases the economy, benefits the economy? And can you explain that just a little bit?
The reason that I said that is the first quote there that's on the thing actually comes from nonprofit arts and cultural industry generates $166 billion annually in economic activity, 3.7 million full-time jobs, and in the city of Phoenix, the total economic impact of the nonprofit arts and culture industry totaled $361 million during 2005. So that's from the city of Phoenix. So, and obviously the reason is you're going to get tourists, you're going to have more people come to your city. Your city will be known for different things. For example, Kansas City, Missouri is known as the city of fountains now. Their arts board purposefully puts fountains along with any city project so that people now can do a tour of the city and see all the benefits and tie it into businesses and whatever else. So that would be the idea. One idea the board tossed around is an art walk along where the recreation campus is, City Hall, the Public Works Building, all that, and have some sort of tie-in that would tie everything together art-wise, and so you could have a whole little tour of that area and see all of those things. So that would be an economic impact.
Okay. As we all know right now, we're in pretty, tough economic times, so it'd be pretty hard to say, let's go spend more money on art when we want to keep people employed.
Of course.
But are there other strategies that can be utilized to bring more art to our community? For an example, having art competitions where our residents or residents of the valley or the state or whomever could compete, and knowing that their piece would be mounted at such and such a place or on such and such a wall or whatever.
A few slides in, there is a concept of a traveling art program, which is kind of along those lines. A juried art show, those kinds of things, which is exactly what you're talking about. So yes, those are. The only thing that we would require then is someone to donate the space. And then there's several things that need to be taken into consideration, like is it going to have to be insured? What happens to the art when it goes off display? Mounting supplies, that kind of stuff. So there is still some minimal cost there, but where, that kind of thing. But the board could easily put that together, yes.
Personally, I would encourage that as at least one of the approaches.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, having been a board member of West Valley Art Museum, I know that they have a field out there next to the museum where they used to have several pieces of outdoor art. And unfortunately, I think because of vandalism and whatever, they're down to about 1.5 pieces or something. And one of my suggestions to West Valley Art Museum, and it could be to the herd too, is if there's opportunity to place a piece of art out into public space and then give directions to the museum, say, if you want to see more of this kind of art, you can visit the Herd Museum or West Valley Art Museum at such and such a place. And maybe that could be a partnership that we could consider.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Mr. Alton?
This meeting, this workshop is long coming. I wish that we could have done this probably 6 months ago. I think you've done a great job, and you've already heard a couple of our concerns was that let's put it in places where a lot of people will see it. And we have to get out of the box, so to speak. We have to find ways in which to encourage citizen involvement and find ways in which to display artwork to the masses. And we can certainly do that as we go through our planning process. We can certainly recommend it to developers of having an area in which to display artwork in different foyers or whatever. We have a great opportunity, I believe, in the new City Hall, and that is a great venue in which to display artwork. And I'm sure that we have such a great city attorney that we can find ways in which to come up with the indemnity agreements that are necessary and things of that nature as to the displaying of private works. Okay, and what I would hope that we would get to is and it's my understanding that the art community really does communicate with one another throughout the Arizona and throughout probably the western United States, and that is that maybe there are other people that would like to have their artwork displayed as well, and we would encourage them to open up a business here in Surprise. I would encourage private galleries to open up a business here in Surprise. I would hope that we would come up with an area that could be called the artist area of new downtown Surprise. But I think we have a group now that works through the other museums and so forth that could possibly bring forward some art and display it in the new City Hall, in the new council chambers, in the new council offices, in the city manager's office. I mean, there's a public-private partnership that could really bring forth some unique insights into art. I would encourage us to work with Dysart and to get their young people involved in the art program, and I had an opportunity to sit in on the interviews, and you've got two dynamic people that really have a lot of experience and a lot of great in-depth knowledge and vision as to how this might work out. And I would ask you to really take what they have to heart and see if we can bring this about. But we can rotate this artwork. We can, the colonnade, I'm sure, would be interested in artwork. And there's all kinds of venues that we could bring in art. And I know you're dying to say something, so go ahead.
We actually had talked about in City Hall having just, once we met with the architect, figuring out where we could put in kind of a museum display case kind of thing. And we would pay to have that part put in as the art board. And then, again, use juried shows, schools, whatever, to get rotate the displays around exactly what you're talking about. And that way the hardware would be there. The city, if the council approved it, it would be there, and we wouldn't have to worry about how to display it and vandalism or anything like that. We'd have a little bit more control over it. So
and in the fact that it's in City Hall, I don't think there would be too much vandalism.
Well, yeah, hopefully, yeah, of course.
We'll see to that. One of the things I should have mentioned, I think you're probably aware of it, is that on these special council, the first Thursday, we all come dressed very casually. If you wear a tie, you get fined. So those fines will go directly to
there
you guys.
you go. That's good. I like that.
But there's one more little way to generate some revenue. I would like to point out, and by thanking your board, is that you're not just talking about a sculpture or something hanging on the wall. You have been very, very interested in our entry monuments coming into the city and in our medians and how they're landscaped, because you recognize that that's creating that sense of arrival, that sense of place is what makes a community special. And so you're near and dear to the economic development folks because they recognize that their job is easier when they're promoting our city, bringing in businesses, and the people are driving along streets that have nice entry monuments and well-landscaped streets. So you've done a great job, and we recognize you for that as well.
Thank you, which segues lovely into the fact
Oh,
that we
there
had
you
talked
go.
about those. Yeah, and we were really interested in how that would play out, and even we were very pleased that they even came to us to ask about the light fixtures and stuff, which we totally loved. And so, that was really great. We really appreciated the fact that they asked us, we got to work with them, and quite frankly, they did all the work. All we had to say was, this is pretty. So that worked out really well for us as well, and it's going to be fabulous, we think. So that's great. We really appreciated that.
Unfortunately, the money that you just got from the two Thai guys, you have to pay me now because I did the segue.
Man, I'll try to have to work to get it back. And this is also what Councilman Alton was talking about, traveling art program. The fact that, there is a possibility of putting together a traveling art program. And as a matter of fact, we had received documentation with someone else suggesting this through the city. And, we're not at all opposed to that. We'd love to look into that. And I think that goes a little further than just a juried exhibition or something like that, and really gets it into more of a place where we could continually put these things and coming up with where and whom and that kind of thing. So,
Just for clarification, I just found out what juried show was. So if you could possibly share that with the people that are here as well as the people watching at home.
all it really means is that it's people can contribute art, and then it is voted on in some way. There's a variety of ways you can do it, and then it is judged in some way. And again, it could be by secret ballot, or it could be the art authorities that decide it, and then someone's usually awarded either a prize or a poster gets made of their particular piece or whatever, something like that.
Okay,
so
so
it's
there's
pretty much
some-
just a competition.
Yeah, and this is what people vie for.
Right. And you get a ribbon,
artists.
like a winner kind of thing.
Sure. Okay. Is there other municipalities?
Exactly.
Is there other municipalities within the valley that do juried shows?
Scottsdale does them all the time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So does Phoenix. Just about everybody does them, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Glendale.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're the only ones that don't do it.
No, not the only one. It's okay. And this is a whole other kind of question now. We, over the past couple of years, have done a grants program as the Art Board. And what this essentially is $25,000 that is set aside, and people apply to us for grants, and then we take the best candidates up to $5,000 each and then award them. And the candidates are things like schools to bring in the opera or the ballet, or Sun City to bring in a band, the museums to bring in, whatever, hoop dancers or something special like that. Now, I guess the question we have is that this is obviously money that doesn't go directly back to the capital projects. It's not tied to a building, but it is still tied to the Surprise residents, and it offers them benefit. So is this something the council is interested in seeing continued, expanded? Any thoughts on our grants program?
Well, we're giving you the money in which to spend for art, but I don't know if it was our intention or the intention of previous council is for you to give the money away.
Excuse me. Are as part of the grants is the programming is occurring in Surprise?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I was going to make a comment before. That's the one thing I'd like to see out of the Cultural Advisory Board is to kind of expand, go beyond the public art, and this is exactly what I was talking about. What can we do theatrically? What can we do? Is that a word? Is that a
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very good word.
Musically, and I think this brings that culture into our community, and I like the idea. I read what the mayor said, and the funding. I would leave that to you guys, but it's kind of tough times right now to expand on such a program. But I like it. As long as that programming is staying in Surprise and Surprise is benefiting from that program.
The only caveat is that obviously other people are allowed to attend, but,
But we're hosting it.
right, we are, yes.
Is there potential for your committee to look for grants that might be available for public art in our city?
We'd have to figure that out.
Does that, Julie, does that exist?
Critically, yes, there would be. Right, but my only question is can we as the board have applied, does the city have to apply, or who actually has to apply? But
Right.
theoretically, yes.
That would be my follow-up, is typically there's a
Sometimes it's
process.
501c3, it depends.
And if you were aware of a process, we would certainly want to partner with you in finding the right people to do it. It might be our residents have to come
Right.
forward and say, this is what we're looking for. Randy?
Typically, it's not uncommon that the arts community, or the arts board in this case, would identify a grant, even write the grant, and then it'd be submitted to the city for endorsement or for actual application, because frequently it does have to be the, a governmental entity.
Right. My thought is that, the grant writers, there's far and few between. The city has a grant writer that possibly you can use the resources of that grant writer in order to write the grant, because there is a uniqueness in writing grants to get them approved. So I like what you said, city manager, but I would take it one little step further, and that is to see if we can use our city staff to assist in that process.
Yeah, we can assist. I will say this, when you write various types of grants, you have to remember the people that are awarding these grants have a flair towards the arts. So consequently, people that are in the arts have the ability sometimes to add that additional flair that may make that grant more successful, but we'd be glad to partner with them if they identify a grant opportunity that they think we're well situated to apply for.
Sure, thank you.
All righty. And then that also was another great segue by Councilman Williams there, to cultural events and venues. So I have been on this board for 2.5 years now, and we have never been able to do a cultural event yet. I would very much, as an anthropologist, love to see more cultural events come to the city. I understand that there is a possibility to partner with like the recreation campus and that kind of stuff and put stuff together. So hopefully we can really move forward on that. We just need to, hear how you all feel about that. Obviously, Councilman Williams just made his point very clear, but, other thoughts, comments, things you'd like to see.
Right. And it's been demonstrated recently. I'll explain how it's been demonstrated, but we would like to see that partnership with your committee, with museums, and with what happens in our programming in the city, particularly when we have exciting sporting events and people come from all over. We have participants from different countries, and to have you guys consider helping us come up with some ideas, us and the different museums, ideas to make it a cultural event as well. Now here, the example that I want to give is really a great one, and that is the city's partnership with Heard Museum. Instead of taking money that was allocated for trophies, Mark Coronado and his group took money and bought Kachina dolls, and the Kachinas themselves are pieces of art. Mm-hmm. They're also pieces of our Southwest history, and they're very beautiful and unique. And it turned out that 2 of them went to Sweden. Mm-hmm. And one of the players from Sweden called and he says, "Could I get a book on Kachinas?" And then another, as I understand it, another player who didn't get one called and asked how he could get one. So when we do those kinds of creative partnerships, we're promoting the arts, mm-hmm. we're promoting surprise, and we're making events in our community more special than they are in other communities. And I think as a result, not fully because of Kachina, but because of the great job that the city did with the last tennis tournament, we have a Fed Cup coming. Yeah. So we're going to have women from other countries coming in to play our ladies, and another opportunity. So put on your creative caps. We know you got them, and give ideas. We want to hear them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just had an idea, in looking over this too, with some of these ideas that some cities have bundled, attractions with hotels and dinner accommodations so that you can get a couple of
Would you go up to
tickets.
the microphone, please? Just pull it,
Here,
Skip.
right here.
Sure. Right here. Okay. Okay. Just to mention that some cities have bundled attractions, and one was called the Jersey Arts Weekends. And they give hotel and dinner, and they give you a couple tickets, say to like the sporting events, and also to a guided tour for an art walk or whatever we would have. So that would be an idea of a lot of people benefiting in the community. You'd have the art and the dinners, the restaurant business hopefully benefiting. So that would be one way of going about, encouraging it. So.
Yeah. I think we as a city are heavily invested in art. And I would like to see your committee help West Valley Art Museum and Heard Museum to be more economically viable in this city. That is something concrete that this committee could really do to help this city, because both these museums are not being utilized to their capacity, not even nowhere near their capacity. And you guys are used to being around art, how to promote it and how to position it, and that's where I would like to see your effort in somehow interfacing with the Heard in the West Valley. So.
Yeah, the other day I did a promotional spot for the Be Surprised, Buy Surprise for KFYI, and unfortunately they cut this part, but I said, we have unique opportunities. I talked about the chocolate factory in Surprise, and I said we have two museums who have great gift shops that have gifts for all ages and all price ranges. And unfortunately, they cut that part, but the message is still there, and that's the one that we need to make sure gets out. Is that one of the ways that we can help the museums is by letting people know that those gift shops are there, and they've got unique turquoise jewelry, beaded jewelry, and just so many other things. So we can think about how to do that. Joe?
Through the chair. I like that idea of packaging stuff at these events, because I'm a big promoter of, we've got one of the best public facilities, and now we're getting events there. And I've talked to Kate, I said, tell me what you need to get into these things, because we got people here and they're always asking me, okay, what can we do? You can go to the Heard right there, you can do this, we've got these. But I think they've got to know, if they knew ahead of time what package they had, they don't have to ask me or ask somebody else. It's already out there and they can choose. Okay, we want this restaurant, we want this. That's a very good start, and I like that. By the way, I think the Kachinas were your idea, or somewhat your idea. When I presented those to the third and fourth place finishers,
Yeah, they thought they were
those tennis players almost were afraid to handle it. They were like, they told me these are the best trophies we've ever got. They weren't sure what to do with it. They liked them that much. They're like, whoa,
Todd Martin couldn't stop talking about his too.
and it was just a delight. That was a great idea, and I think the mayor had a big say in that, and that was a brilliant idea. And it was part of our history. And like you said, I'm glad they called you to ask what it's about. But we need stuff like that, and that's what we should be doing. And I think anything we can do to help you, let us know, because we will. I'm in full support of that. We need to get these sporting events to turn into arts and culture things. And so we've got another big event coming up soon. So if we can work fast, we can take advantage of that. So,
Joe, I don't want to cost Coronado another buck, but his idea.
Okay, all right. Well, Mark, good job wherever you're at.
Do we have, another comment I have, do we have a venue for local artists? And that's another thing. I know we've got some talented artists in this community, and I think there should be a way that we could come up with some kind of artist show and get people involved in art. So therefore, they join the West Valley Art Museum, they join the Heard Museum, and just market art, because it's a special place. Yeah.
All it takes is money.
Yeah.
We've been looking for a gallery, actually, a gallery space, to have a public exhibition space for artists to use in the West Valley. And, it's a matter of finding the right place.
Well, I think we're going to be moving into a new city hall. I just got to believe we got some space.
About this building.
Yeah, don't even this building to us. This is a fabulous building.
So I would really like to see that.
I speak to that too. I'm Dot Reeve and I'm a potter. So I'm a potter and I'm involved with the Shimmer and currently with the West Valley, the new pottery show that's coming up. There are several things that happen with the art world that I'm in. And of course, that's a lot of workshops. And last year I was involved in trying to get an NCECA, which is the National Ceramic Educators Group, that's coming to Phoenix for their national convention. They'll be here in April. So we are having a show out at the West Valley to try and get people out here from Phoenix.
Great.
But they do workshops all over the country. I've been to San Diego, to Portland, to Sacramento, to all over for these workshops. And I tried to have one here and had a terrible time finding a venue. And finally, after a lot of time, we got the West Valley to say, yeah, we could do that. But we could put together potters workshop, painters, watercolorists, plein air, do all of these type of things that then
I promote
take
my
your
own book?
restaurants and your hotels, because they're always 3-day-week workshops.
Right.
I would really like to see that happen, and if this committee could work with that too, because I would see that making Surprise a destination. And that, to me, it has to be a destination that people want to come to.
This goes back to what Richard said, is we'd like to see that happen for all age groups, is have something special happening for the youth, but then also for the adults where they can throw some clay and make something, or at least see how it's done. It'd be great.
Mayor, that before it was mentioned that there might be some room available in the new city hall, some changing space available, and I just want to say that the Herd is more than happy to contribute to that, and our shop manager has said that she will change the space out once a month. So, and the things that come out of the shop are just museum quality pieces. So it's like having the collection at the city hall, and we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, that would be great, and I might be going a little bit further than I should in a public meeting like this, but maybe there is some opportunity to have a display of some of the objects that could be purchased at the Herd shop and at the West Valley Art Museum shop. So just to keep stirring the pot. So I don't know if we can do that, but we'll check with the city manager and rest of the council.
Something on here, put a sign on each art that's for sale. You can put that on there.
Yeah.
But we're not taking any money at the city. So that is strictly between the museums.
That'd be great.
All right, I think that's the end of all of our questions, unless you all have anything else for us.
Oh, it's another avenue.
Randy.
For it.
Yeah, I'd like to focus to make sure we're clear, because I know this question came up when I first got here, and the original question that precipitated this meeting was how the art dollars were spent, because the dollars had been primarily focused towards the interior of the building, and some people felt that a higher percentage of the dollars needed to be focused external, where there potentially were more people. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, are you comfortable with the with this particular commission making those determinations after you've heard this presentation, or would you like to specify that a certain percentage of the money that's allocated be used for art that's exterior to the building?
Well, for me personally, one of the first things they've done is, or maybe not the first, is talked about our streetscapes and our entryway monuments. And so what that tells me is that they have the ability to look at the whole picture. And so I'd probably prefer that we leave it up to them, and also that that if they recognize a piece or an artist doing a piece is the right way to go, that we put our confidence in your committee.
Thank you. And up until the public safety building, everything we'd done had been outside. The public safety building was the first thing that was completely interior. Before that, everything was outside. And then the City Hall, the two pieces we started with were indoor, but we hope to do outdoor.
Yeah, the only problem I had, though I think the 1% is probably a good number. I'm not an expert
It's
at this.
typical for most cities, actually.
Yeah, but the problem I had was an artist from Seattle doing an interior in a southwestern community. That bothered me. And I'm sure you guys had a good reason, but I would like to keep the money local when at all possible. Because we're spending a lot of money.
I believe she was also the first that was not local. She was our first one that wasn't local as well. Everything else that we've done has been local, within Arizona at least.
But the other one was, I thought, from Denver.
Ramona Sayetskoa, she's from New Mexico.
Okay.
But and then BJ Katz, who's doing City Hall, is from Chandler, so she's local-ish.
Okay, so no Seattle.
Right.
No, I don't have anything against Seattle. It's just I would like to.
Well, and it has to do with who applies. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
our hands are tied by the quality of the people that apply. So.
Yeah, I think what you're hearing is, if there's a way, if there's an artist that is a local resident or first local and then
Valley.
nearby, we want to give them some preferential treatment simply because they're part of our community. But if you can't accomplish what you know you need to accomplish, then, again, we appoint you because we trust that you're going to give us good advice and guidance in this area.
Yeah, and I just want to take it a little bit deeper, and that is that I would like to see the utilization of amateurs as well as students' artwork to be deployed in various venues and have it rotated. I like the idea about the herd coming in and rotating your items. I think that's an excellent idea. I think possibly the West Valley Art Museum might be able to do the same thing.
I'm sorry.
And that would be in City Hall. And there's a lot of people that come to City Hall, and especially after we get it built, there will be a lot of the public that will just come to see the offices. So, I'm all for inside, but we also are looking for the outside to have, but in areas that the majority of the people will go if it's outside.
I was going to say, I would be more than happy to have a piece of student art on my wall in the new office. I'm sure the other council members would be too.
If I have an office, you can put one in my office. A pottery, too.
Okay. Any other discussion? Kate?
I just want to invite the entire room. We are having our member night tonight. You don't have to be a member because I'm inviting you personally. So we're here till 7. We're open till 7, and it's wine and lots of good things to eat. So you're all invited.
Okay, and one of us ran with the herd, and one of us slept in with the herd. So,
Two of us ran with it.
two ran with the herd, okay, and one slept in.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I rolled,
We support the arts.
I made it a whole mile.
My final comment would be that this has been one of the best discussions. That's the intention of sitting down here with you all and you having different people come to the mic and share ideas and thoughts and so forth. So we congratulate you on a good, very good discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have tennis tonight, Christy?
I have Champlain at 7:30. So I was like, I gotta roll this along.
Yeah.
Way to go, John.
Cheers, John.
Get your. Take it easy, man.
Turn off your microphone, John.
That's okay. Bailey talks enough for 2 mics. Get it over there.
What are you drawing?
He's drawing.
You should take that to a psychologist. I'm sure somebody can interpret.
I'll write the indemnification if you cover the liability.
Yeah.
The other day on CNN, they had a series on the different presidents that doodled what they did, and they had a list of them.
That one's live.
Hey, Doctor.
Okay.
Good evening.
City Clerk, item number 3, please.
Yes, thank you. Maricopa County Flood Control District would like to inform the council of all the district projects and studies that affect the city. That would be City Engineer Bob Mackey.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to get out of here in a second, but I just want to, I'll sit in the back and let Greg take over, but I just want to preface his remarks a little bit by saying that this is very timely to have this presentation because there's a lot going on in the city of Surprise that involve flood control and major drainage issues. So what Greg is going to do tonight is briefly go over a little bit about his organization and the processes, and then we're going to talk about some individual projects that we've got going on right now. And I know we're running a little bit over on time, and Greg said he would shorten up his presentation, but I encourage you to actively participate in these projects and really find out what's going on because we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, Tim Phillips, our Chief Engineer and General Manager, extends his condolences that he wasn't here. He really did want to attend, but he had another commitment that came up. He also wanted me to convey to you that you guys are our clients, so we want to make sure that we're providing a good service. So if you ever have any issues, please call me first. I want to make sure you're taken care of so that Tim doesn't get called from you guys. So anyhow, that's a little self-promotion there, I guess. Let's go ahead and go down. Real quickly, I wanted to go over briefly, some of you may not be aware of the sort of like what the district mission is. I've done this presentation in the past of what some of the flood hazards are, and then I want to go into some of the planning projects and capital improvement projects in here. So real quickly, let's go over the district mission. Is there a way to make this full screen on this? There we go. Sorry about that. All right. Basically, our mission has 4 items to it, and as you can see, is basically to try to reduce hazards. In these 4 items is basically outreach. That's what we're doing right now. It's also public involvement, public information. The next part is identification. This is where we do delineations. You'll see that come up on floodplain maps. Some people call them firm panels. Regulation is where we actually regulate to those panels, and in the City of Surprise, we're actually your floodplain administrator. So if somebody builds within the floodplain, the city makes those people aware. They submit their plans to us. We actually help review and make recommendations. Maybe they need to elevate or do something to take care of that particular hazard. And the last one is remediation, and this is where all these plans are coming in. How do we alleviate the flooding problems? So what are some of the flooding hazards here in the City of Surprise? As you can see, there's basically 4. These are actual flooding photos that were taken back in 2003 that typifies 3 types of the flooding hazards. The one on the lower left side is a riverine. You can see that it looks like a river going between the houses. The next one is sort of a sheet flow. You can see how it's moving around the houses. And then the last one is ponding. And that's where the water just comes and sits and the house is underwater. So as you can see, these areas are actually up in the Whitman or north of McMicken Dam. There are some flooding hazards in here. The other one that we have in this area, and this is actually of the white tanks, is what we call alluvial fans. I explained this a little bit in my presentation on Whitman a while back, but what we have in the Whitman area and actually in the white tanks is where water comes out of the mountains real fast, it slows down, and then because of the sediment dropping out of it, it wants to go like a delta, where if you're going into ocean. So With alluvial fans, we're not sure where that flooding hazard is on that alluvial fan plane, so it creates a huge hazard and a lot of additional cost. And as we go farther into the Whitman area, we've actually identified a couple of these, and hopefully in March I'll be bringing that study back forward. All right, the other thing that I wanted to talk about briefly is how do we get from a planning project to actually constructing something. And this right here is sort of like an outline planning process. First, we try to determine the area. In one case, you hear me talking about Whitman. Then we actually go out and map it. We need mapping, contour elevations to develop our hydrology models. And from those hydrology models, we can actually do the delineations or identify the flooding hazards. Then the next step after identifying the hazards is, okay, how do we mitigate those hazards? And that's where we're at in almost all of City of Surprise planning area. We've delineated most of the hazards. Now we're trying to say, okay, we have a whole bunch of plans that need to be implemented to alleviate these current and future hazards. All right, once the plan has been adopted by the city and by flood control, the city typically submits those to our CIP prioritization procedure. This procedure is open to the city once a year, and we rank your guys' request with, I believe there's like 23 other agencies within Maricopa County, and we rank it, and then if it ranks good and approved, then we'll try to develop IGAs to move it forward into design and construction. And the whole time through all this, you see this bottom line, public involvement. Public involvement includes coming out and briefing you guys at these type of meetings. So, planning studies. Where have we planned within Maricopa County? As you can see, we've done a large portion of it. It's mainly the metro Phoenix area. Out in the Surprise area, it's basically the Whitman and the Agua Fria watersheds. And Whitman's ongoing. The Agua Fria watershed is already completed, and we actually have a couple projects that we've actually worked with you on, and we'll talk about these a little bit more in depth. All right, specifically in the White Tanks area here that just came up is we're actually going back and restudying that. We're using NOAA 14 to reevaluate the hydrology, and what it could possibly do is reduce some of the queues, but right now I'm thinking it's only going to maybe reduce it by about 10%. The other area that we're studying, of course, is the Whitman ADMP and McMicken Dam area, and that's ongoing. And again, I'll come back with that study with their proposed solutions, final proposed solutions to you in March for hopefully another work session, and then hopefully you guys will take it and adopt it. And that's McMicken Dam right there. All right, the projects in Whitman ADMP that actually were submitted to our CIP by the City of Surprise for this year's prioritization procedure are highlighted down in the bottom. The circle on the western side is Martin Acres drainage. We'll be working on that one as part of the ADMP. We want to relook at what was submitted as part of the city's CIP prioritization within the study. We think that there might be a slightly better solution. Additionally, on the eastern side is a Happy Valley drainage improvements. There's some significant problems with how some of the developers and the flows were considered. So we're trying to work with the city and the developers to try to implement this project. Matter of fact, I believe that developers are willing to cost share the city's funding to do a quick study to define what this project really should be. And once that's defined, we'll bring that back forward to you guys. All right, one of the primary areas I wanted to talk about today is mainly south in the White Tanks area, because I haven't really presented this to you in about 4 to 5 years. Within this area, you can see that there's a lot of different projects. Up north, of course, you have McMicken Dam to orient you, and on the south is the Gila River, and it ties into a project. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of it. It's called the El Rio Watercourse Master Plan. It's very similar to the Agua Fria Watercourse Master Plan, and that's the blue line going up and down the river, right up in this area here. That's the Agua Fria, and this is the El Rio Watercourse Master Plan. These are two very large projects, and we're working with other cities to implement them. All right, the central feature within this project area is the Loop 303 drainage improvements. We are cutting some IGAs with ADOT to actually implement this. We will be a cost share partner with them. The reason what we're doing is we're paying to upgrade their 50-year system to a 100-year system. So that's the basis of the cost share. But it goes beyond that. As part of ADOT's funding, they only have funding for the freeway north of I-10. They need to build or have the channel built south of I-10 so that they can construct the features north of I-10. So this is a very critical project to ADOT. Additionally, we're working with the city. Here we go. Up in the Waddell area, there's a proposed basin up in that area. The district in the current IGA is looking at owning and operating that. We believe that it would be easier for the district to own and operate that and cut agreements with the City of Surprise as if at some future date you guys would like to make that more of a multi-use facility, park, or whatever it is that you may see that it wants to be. The other thing is flood control also try to set aside enough right away so that that could happen, whether it's ball fields or again, park-like features, and we're trying to work with your staff on that. The other projects and that are dependent upon the 303 is actually the Reams Road Channel, and this is an IGA that we have cut with you guys, and it's located right along Reams Road. If you go past your city limits at Peoria, we're building the outfall right now as we speak. There's about a mile or so section that the City of Surprise has to complete to finish that up. In our agreement, we said we would build the outfall and you guys would get the other parts built. And you basically have done that through developer agreements. But, however, there's still one small section that I believe that the city will end up having to pay a majority of the cost. Both of these also tie into the Northern Parkway. If you're not familiar with that, that's a major roadway basically along the Butler alignment that'll tie into the 303. And as part of that, we're trying to put in some regional facilities along that one. And this will be highlighted a little better examples on the next project. Some facilities that are actually protecting the City of Surprise that's in this area. Of course, you heard me mention McMicken Dam. The flows actually want to flow from the north and west to the south and east. So McMicken Dam eliminates a lot of the flows from the City of Surprise along with what we call the Northern Inlet Channel. And both of those are in place, and we'll move forward with them. There are some other projects down south, just for your information. We've been trying to work with Luke Air Force Base to put an outfall channel. Right now, the base commander's headquarters is in a floodplain. So hopefully one of these days we'll take them out. And that ties into Bullard Wash, which you see in the brown down there. That's part of that outfall system there. Just some information for you guys. All right, moving on to a little bit more detail within the City of Surprise. You'll notice in here we show the Loop 303 drainage improvements, but we don't show the basin up at Waddell. but there should be a proposed basin somewhere in the vicinity of Waddell, and that's working with Persada. And hopefully we can get that worked out. The 303 cuts off all the drainage, then Reams Road takes the drainage that falls between the 303 drainage improvements and carries that down to the existing golf course, if you guys are familiar with that, the Falcon Dunes Golf Course. We partnered with the base to cut off the flows, because if you may remember back in, I believe it was 83, 82, the Air Force Base actually went under water because the Dysart drain actually flowed backwards. So that's the reason why that Dysart drain and the Falcon Dunes Golf Course is built there. And then we'll probably partner with ADOT, Peoria, and the other agencies, El Mirage, to put in the Northern Parkway channel. Tying into that is what we call the ATSF channel, and that's a study that's ongoing right now. We have identified that there's some potential flooding issues adjacent to the railroad, and it could affect the city's wastewater treatment plant. So we're trying to work something out there. Additionally, you can see there's another study up in the upper corner that affects the city of Surprise, which is the Waddell Car. And this is trying to tie into an existing outfall channel through El Mirage. And that'll eliminate some more of those flows that pond behind the ATNSF Railroad, or I think now it's the Burlington Santa Fe
Northern.
Yeah,
BNSF.
Railroad there. They keep changing their names on me. You can tell I've been at this for a while. But anyhow, we'll work with them on that one. And again, a CAR is a candidate assessment report. It's like a step before a pre-design. I'd like to say it's a Hummer. No, some of them cost more than a Hummer. Bad jokes, I'm sorry. Anyhow, we're in the process of hopefully finalizing some of those, and once we get a better handle on what they should be, we'll try to work out agreements again with the City of Surprise. As part of that, there will be expectation of cost share funding from the city on these projects. Again, we don't want to do anything that the city doesn't want us to do, and one of the ways that we do that is by not doing a project unless the city is vested, and that's how we move forward on that. And those are those projects. So what are our objectives? Well, one is to get ahead of development. You saw that on our planning. We want to identify the floodplains. We want to try to identify regional facilities. If you really start looking at what we are proposing, they're on about a 2 to 3 mile grid. They're more regional in nature. The other thing with our facilities, we spend multiple millions of dollars on them. How often does it really rain here in the valley? Once a year, 10 times a year? So it makes sense that our facilities should be looking at multi-use opportunities, whatever they may be. There's more than just parks and recs that they could be a multi-use. The other thing that we need to do is also look at synergy. How can we minimize our cost? One example is that we're working with ADOT. They want the dirt from one of our basins. They actually bought a piece of property, and it's reduced the cost of that project by as much as 30%. So trying to figure out ways to partner with other agencies is a very key thing that we try to do. So how do we do this? Well, we got to develop partnerships with our client cities, such as the City of Surprise. Continue close coordination with your staff. And we like to do periodic briefings to the councils to make sure you guys are aware of what we're doing. Maybe we're doing something that you guys don't want us to do, and if you remember the first thing that I said, we don't want to go there. We want to do what the city wants us to do. And the last thing is we definitely always need to coordinate with the public. If you're not familiar with at least the projects I've been involved with, we go over and above on public meetings, whatever it takes. So with that, I believe I have questions.
Anybody have questions? It's a pretty thorough report. Appreciate it.
Just have a compliment. Greg, thank you very much for coming up to Whitman with us a couple weeks ago to advise people up that way. They're outside of Surprise's city limits, but they're within our planning area, and they were very concerned about what they had heard about the alluvial plan and all that. So thank you for educating us up there as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
We do have a booklet of fact sheet information that Greg has left with us, and we'll make them available to council.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4.
This is a presentation and discussion regarding the draft of the proposed updated materials relating to the city's sign code. Thank you, Jeff.
Mayor, Chair, members of council, we have undertaken a very extensive review of the city's sign code. What we'd like to present this evening is why we need a sign code, to describe the draft development process, because we try to keep it as transparent as possible, to highlight major recommended changes, and more importantly, to get policy direction from the council this evening on certain elements of the sign code. Why we need a sign code is very apparent if you drive around any place in the United States. With the lack of a sign code, you could have situations like this, or worse yet, situations like this, where businesses take advantage of communities that either have poor sign codes or no sign codes whatsoever. This business owner probably thinks they're promoting their business, but there's so much information here that it probably gets lost. More importantly, signs can have a dramatic impact on people's understanding and feel of your community. You can have outstanding architecture, you can have fabulous landscaping, but it can be really cluttered if you allow signage to take over the landscape. There are good reasons to have a sign code, however. A good sign code can yield quality wall signs such as this that promote businesses and bring people into a development. It can provide visual interest like this blade sign. It also create a really nice sense of entry like this sign that includes a water feature. Signs that have architectural interest that complement buildings and also show landscaping are also wonderful. And also, as this example, and this is a surprise example, signage can be good to promote entry features into residential developments. We did create a sign code committee internal. It not only included staff, but also sign professionals. We wanted to make sure that people who design signs, people who build signs were involved in that process, and they were involved from day one. The committee worked diligently. They worked every other week for 3 months during this past summer to come up with the plan itself. It was an exhaustive review. They reviewed the entire sign code and made a number of recommendations. The committee suggested that there's a number of shortcomings with our existing sign code ordinance. Those are the lack of freeway sign regulations, that business signage is really not flexible enough for market, that the temporary signs and political signs in our current code are unclear, and they need revised definitions. The sign code, frankly, is outdated as well. The last change was in 1996, so we really need to take a good look at it, and we did. What we need direction from City Council on is the recommendations that we have on commercial signage, temporary signage, political signs, and also some new programs that we'd like you to consider. And those programs are regarding freeway signs and the comprehensive sign program. In terms of outreach, we did provide copies of the draft sign code to the Chamber of Commerce for their review, and also to the Arizona Sign Association. There's a member of the association here this evening. We appreciate that they're being involved in this. That's great to see, and we look forward to ongoing dialogue with their association. We also had a public hearing held by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Regarding commercial signage, our current sign code limits wall and monument signage. It really doesn't work well right now for large commercial areas. We think that allowable signage should flex with the size of the shopping center or the individual building. We're recommending that we suggest increases to permanent signs is a better way to go than allowing more temporary signs. This very brief chart gives you an idea of what we're talking about. If you look at the developments that are over 20 acres, right now they can only have 60 square feet of signage. We're recommending that that's increased to 80 feet. For single-tenant buildings up to 2 acres, currently they can only have 24 square feet of signage. We're recommending 36. And for developments over 2 acres that have single-tenant buildings, it's 36 now. We're recommending an increase of 48. Which brings us to our first question for council this evening. These increases could allow businesses to have up to 25% more signage based on their development. Are you in agreement with these increases?
Yeah, I think probably the council wants to see the quality of the signage, and if the quality is there, then it would be agreeable. If the quality's not there, we want it 25% smaller.
We understand. We agree. Temporary signs is another issue. Temporary signs can have a dramatic negative visual impact on a community. Some temporary signs are needed, however. We acknowledge that for grand openings and special promotions. But some businesses get very, very carried away with temporary signage. Here's an example. First one is a A-frame that's blocking the sidewalk. You also see streamers, festooned across this entire parking lot. And then also this inflatable. I guess I could never wrap my arms around how Godzilla helps sell cars, but we'll see. But yeah, exactly. But I'm not picking on car dealers though, because here are some very good examples of car dealers have done some very tasteful signage to promote their business. Temporary signs, A-frames, can also be a challenge. Here's another example of poor A-frame temporary signage. They tend to proliferate. They tend to cluster. But more importantly, I think, please note that some of the signs, like in this example, block pedestrian ways. And in this case, if a vehicle was in this location trying to negotiate this intersection, it would block the sight lines. And that does create a significant problem. Temporary signs, bad examples also include window signs. If there's allowed to be too much, you can't even see into this business. If it had nice architecture, you wouldn't be able to tell because the window signs are so poor. There are good window signs out there, though, a lot of them, and here's some good examples that are either applied to the window itself or even these temporary signs that really promotes their business. These are good examples. Our recommendations to you then are to provide window signs that only cover up 25% of the storefront, not 100% like in some of the examples, and also to make the window signs user-friendly. We don't think a permit's required as long as they meet the recommendations. Banners are also an issue as a temporary sign. This sign, as it stands right now, is actually legal in the city of Surprise. As you can see, this sign would, without question, cause sightline problems for anybody at that intersection. It could create hazards if there was a storm of some kind and the banner was thrown out into the street in a windstorm. These things are susceptible to weather in terms of their ability to deal with sun and wind and so on. But really, it detracts from the quality of the landscaping. I think originally this landscaping looked real well, but you can't see it because of the banner. Banners are appropriate in certain situations. Our recommendation to you is to allow banners, but allow banners that are only attached to the building. We think banners should be allowed up to 3 times a year. I think that's reasonable. And for every time a banner is on display, it should be for no longer than 30 days.
Excuse me, how are you going to police that?
With a permit, a banner permit. They come in and get a permit, and we create a calendar.
And what does it cost for that permit?
Oof.
$5,000.
$55 is the voice behind it. Yeah.
Glad you're here. Thank you.
So our recommendation is that the current sign code is really confusing regarding temporary signage. It really yields the proliferation of pennants, A-frames, balloons, things I think that we don't want to clutter the community. So our question is, should temporary signs be limited to banners on buildings and appropriately sized window signs?
I would speak to the idea of blocking sidewalks. I have great difficulty getting around already, and when you put half the sidewalks filled up with a sign, it really does not only make the place look cluttered, but make it difficult for anybody to even traverse the area, and they lose customers, I think. So I would be okay with a building banner. I know like Trader Joe's had a big banner on their store recently when they went through their grand opening that several of us attended, and it seemed tasteful, and they'll take it down hopefully within a reasonable length of time if it hasn't already been taken down, probably.
If we're talking about signs held by people walking around, we have new regulations in the sign code. Those, we call them sign walker signs. Those are actually have some pretty good protections under, believe it or not, Arizona state statute. However, it does allow you, municipalities, to regulate them in terms of where you can allow them and the duration. So our recommendation to you on sign walkers is to allow them only in industrial areas and only during the daylight hours, and that's it. Otherwise, they shouldn't be in the public right-of-way, blocking the streets, spinning or twirling or anything like that.
Going back to the temporary signage question, I'd be in favor of making one exclusion for Sands Chevrolet, and if they want to block the streets to bring people in, then they ought to have that opportunity. I say that in jest, but we really are proud of Sands for coming into Surprise and look forward to their presence here.
I have a few concerns. And I think it has to do with code enforcement. I don't care what time it is. I think it has to do with code enforcement. And that is, it's so easy for somebody to put up a sign. And by the time the code enforcement gets around, and also the time frame in which they penalize or they issue a warning, and then they have to go issue a citation, and then it becomes a real citation after 30 days after that. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. I mean, there are so many abuses to our existing sign ordinances that it would keep code enforcement, two of them, busy every day. The little pole signs with the material that flaps, okay, is a hot item now, and I see that there's some phone companies that are using that. They take them down at night, they put them back out in the morning. That's a distraction. But yet, there's nobody out there policing that. Yeah, go ahead.
If I could address that, we agree 100%. The challenge, though, right now is the sign code is, frankly, poorly written, it's stated. A lot of loopholes throughout the ordinance. What we can do to address your specific suggestion here is to get clear policy direction from council, update the sign code to make it very clear, easy to understand, not only for staff, but for business owners, and then make sure that our code enforcement staff know that they have the support of council, executive staff, to implement it in a very equitable manner, consistent manner. And we're certainly going to do that. Right now, though, without a good sign code, it's hard for us to do that.
Right, and we even, because of the work on Bell Road, the city staff opened it wide open for temporary signs. That work has been completed, and I don't see anybody taking down their signs. And I think we gave them a time frame in which to take them down, and I don't know when that's coming up. But
we actually have just a little bit more work to do on Bell Road regarding the sidewalk crossings. What we didn't want to do was to tell business owners to take down their temporary signs and then see more road work and then ask them why did we make them down so soon. But as soon as the project is completely buttoned up, including the sidewalks, then we're definitely going to go out and have those temporary signs put away.
When will that happen?
Again, as soon as the sidewalks are done, which I believe should be within the next several weeks.
Is that got to do with the crosswalks?
Yes.
I voted yes on 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
But I had a question on number 5. Okay, and that is, are you evaluating the well, let me use an example. Ultra Star Theater on Litchfield. You drive by that, you would never know that was a theater. The sign's too small. You can't read it. It's there, but you can't read it. So you would take into consideration the 1 inch per 50 foot rule of thumb for signage?
Yes.
As far as eyeballing it, reading what it is for that far away in a big center, then that's where the 50%, up to 50%.
You got it exactly right.
Okay. Okay, I'm good with it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned that with the new regs, it would be the size of a sign would increase by 25%.
Yes, sir.
Now, the Walmart sign that we have on Grand Avenue, that's a pretty good size. Another 25% added to that.
That one actually came in as part of a PAD, and they requested a larger sign. So their sign would not increase. That was a special situation.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good question, Roy, but I think they'd have to justify You would have to.
Right, exactly. And I'm going to get to that in a second. Mayor Truitt, would you like me to move on this? Because I can tell it's getting. Political signs, another big issue. We get a lot of complaints from residents about political signs. The primary issue that they have is, why does it seem that we have political signs out there every day of the year?
Right.
The current code has significant loopholes in it, and it really allows political signs to be displayed with no time frames whatsoever. So the question is, it's a real straightforward, and should political signs be limited to being displayed only 60 days prior to an election?
Yes.
I totally agree with that.
No problem.
Michael, is there some sort of, is that a municipal city ordinance, or are there some state laws on political signs too?
Well, in terms of, the city can regulate the time, place, and manner. We can't regulate the content. So in terms of a 60-day restriction, the city can regulate it in that regard.
Okay.
Next is freeway signage. Route 303 corridor is critical to the future of the city of Surprise. We all acknowledge that. The current code does not include standards for signs along freeways. The standards really need to take advantage of the marketing opportunities that such a high-volume roadway present to the city. At the same time, we don't want to go too far to create signs all over the place. We're recommending to you that the maximum height of freeway signs is 80 feet. It's a good size sign. I'll show you the graphic in a second. And also to allow spacing at 880-foot intervals. This image shows you the size of the freeway sign. Again, 80 feet. We put a little bit of a graphic on the bottom that shows a 6-foot person, so you can see that this is a very good size sign. This is not something that we would recommend any place in the city except for along the 303. 80 feet is a good number. It provides plenty of opportunities for large commercial shopping centers to list their tenants. This next slide is probably more important in terms of the spacing. We've had requests from developers in the past about allowing spacing at 500-foot intervals. I think I've shown you this image before. This other one is what we're recommending to you, and that's 880-foot spacing. That's ample opportunities for shopping centers to provide these large signs. So the question we have for you is simply, there are no current standards for freeway signs. Should the freeway signs be spaced at 880 feet? And should the maximum height be 80 feet,
Yes.
80 feet tall?
In the past, we were talking about 500 versus 800. So is there some justification for going to the 880?
Again, just the spacing. If we had 500 feet spacing, you could have up to 10 of these large 80-foot signs in a mile stretch. 500 feet actually is consistent with some of the developments like Prasada that you already have approved in the past. We're trying to even the playing field with the 880-foot spacing limit would apply to Prasada, Vestar, and anybody else that develops property along the 303.
What do other municipalities do?
It's all across the board. I think our recommendation to you is somewhere between conservative and over the top, frankly. It's reasonable, the spacing makes sense, and the height makes sense. You can go to some jurisdictions and they allow signs all over the place.
If we go the 880 and one developer comes in and has 500 feet of, develops 500 feet of frontage, and then the next door neighbor comes in and does 400 feet, are the two of them, between them, allowed to have one of these big signs?
Share a sign?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I don't know what the agreement would be, but it'd be like a...
I have experience with that in other jurisdictions where typically there's a sign easement drawn on the property. It's usually on a common property line. They enter into a sign agreement and they use multiple tenants.
Shared access agreement. Okay.
Excuse me. On the 80-foot sign, would there be any difference whether the freeway is at ground level or part of it is sub-level?
Yeah, we'd recommend to you that we actually average out the grade between the level of the roadway and the level of the sign, and that average level gets you to the 80 feet. In Arizona, frankly, it's not going to make a lot of difference here. Everything's pretty flat along the 303 corridor. Last issue is, and being honest with you, we can't write a perfect sign code. There's always going to be exceptions. Sign folks are always going to want more. That's just the nature of the business. But certain projects, particularly large multi-building initiatives like shopping centers, need some flexibility. So recommending a new comprehensive sign program section of the code. It would allow developers to request sign bonuses up to 50%. And some of the council members were asking about that before. Let me stress to you that this isn't something they would get automatically. It's a bit negotiated. The qualifications include they would have to have a demonstrated need, not just saying I want more signage. It's like, why do you need that? But more importantly, they would have to offer to the city project enhancements. And these enhancements could be additional landscaping on the site, greater setbacks for the sign itself, or upgraded architecture to the building. The sum and substance of this is that the developer receives additional signage. In exchange, the city receives upgraded development. This is Kierland Commons. It's, I think, a very good example. You can look at their architecture. It's very nicely appointed, very unique. But they also asked for and received a great deal of signage. They have their wall signs. They have directory signs with maps. They have wayfinding signs and so on. They upgrade their architecture. They have nice landscaping. They did a lot of things on site. In exchange, they were allowed to do additional signage. We think that makes sense. So our question is, should we offer a comprehensive sign program such as this that allows sign bonuses in exchange for development enhancements?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Very good idea.
Any other questions at all?
I'm sorry, Mr. Randy? My other question had to do with kiosk signs. You know, we do have some situations in Surprise, like back 134th Drive area, where we have businesses that are sort of buried back there.
Mm-hmm.
And are we making some accommodations so that they can have some visibility on the major arterial, be it Bell Road or whatever?
The comprehensive sign program that I just went through would provide opportunities to have off-site signage up front in exchange for the upgraded enhancements that I mentioned to you.
Question, Jeff, what about the big semi-trucks with big signs all over them that park on the sides of roads and things like that? How are we going to control that? Because they can move around. In fact, I think that's their game, is to be mobile.
Yeah, we noted that. That's a temporary sign on a vehicle or trailer. That would now be illegal if you adopt the sign code.
Okay, within the city limits?
Yes, always, yep.
Okay.
A couple of real quick questions. Prohibited signs, signs prohibited. Page 9, vehicle signs. That's. Do they have to be parked for an extended point of time?
I think that's
That
that's
doesn't
exactly.
specify how long this vehicle needs to be parked, or.
Yeah, the intent of that is simply to say just what Councilman Longabaugh brought up, that we have situations in the city where there are tractor trailers that don't have the cab on the front.
Right.
And they've been parked, and they advertise businesses. Those clearly, the intent of those are just to promote and use as a sign, and that's it. Those would be illegal. If someone has their own private vehicle, they're in the insurance business, they're a contractor and so on, those are private vehicles. They have a decal, they have a logo on their private vehicle. That would not fall under this. Those are certainly illegal.
That won't.
And that won't change.
But technically, the way this is written, it doesn't really say that. It doesn't give a time frame. It doesn't give, I mean, some of these vehicles now have vehicle wraps, and they're very eye-catching, and that's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the trailers for a lot of developers, these fifth wheels that don't have a cab on them, and they park them in the construction site for 2 years while they're working. That's probably what I'm assuming you're talking about. But technically, the way it's worded, I don't think.
The way we've written it is vehicle signs when mounted or placed. Again, it means on top of it or stuck to it, if you will, to make sure that it's just for advertising purposes. Again, I would make a clear differentiation between somebody that has a private vehicle or a work vehicle just for their place of business. There's always going to be interpretation to the sign code, but we're comfortable making those calls.
Okay, sign approval as part of a site plan. Site plans don't come before this, before the council, as we said earlier. So the locations and all that of these signs and sign packages won't come before us at all.
Actually, they would in most cases. Remember, PADs always come to City Council.
Right.
We're going to ask for comprehensive sign packages as part of PAD, so you will get the opportunity to review them.
We will, okay.
I was under the impression that the signage was going to be an administrative situation.
Yeah, there's different levels of review, and I glossed over it. I'll try to make it as concise as possible. A single window sign wouldn't even require a permit. A wall sign in an existing shopping center they're changing out is administrative. You issue a permit over the counter. Brand new development, multi-tenant, they're going to be doing it through a PAD. It's going to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and to City Council. There's different layers of it. But complex multi-tenant sign packages will be reviewed by City Council.
Okay, this is a little bit far-fetched, but if we ever decide to build a Times Square West, we're going to need some blinking signs and some neon signs, and we're going to need some signage. Are we going to be able to work that out?
Actually, through the PAD process, through the comprehensive sign package, you could provide some conditions and move forward with that. But they would have to go through a special process, or would have to be a public hearing, and council would have to take specific action on it.
Okay, typically we don't, at workshops, we don't take public comment, but tonight we do have a Mr. Carpenter that's interested in speaking on this issue as an expert, I believe. And so, sir, if you'd step forward.
Now, there's an exception for par 3 golf courses on A-frame signs? Exception?
No, there isn't, so you have to take them down. Sorry, sir.
Hi, James Carpenter. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak at a work session, which is not always that typical, so it's greatly appreciated. And I do happen to have, this is the first thing I'll mention, I do have some DVDs that just talk about the importance of signage. It's done by the International Sign Association, very short and interesting information, so you're more than welcome to grab one of those too. But really, I think that the staff has done a good job in a lot of the areas as mentioned by Jeff in relation to some new sections with the CSP and addressing the freeway signage. But the Sign Association does have some concerns that we would like the opportunity to talk with staff, and I did have the opportunity to talk very briefly with Dennis before the meeting, and we're in the process of figuring out a meeting date just to sit down and talk about some of these concerns and some of these issues. And there's not a lot of them, but there's a few, and I think it should be really vetted out. And unfortunately, for some reason, the Sign Association wasn't totally plugged in earlier, so that would have been great if this could have happened earlier, but for whatever reason, it hasn't. And excuse me, so we're at this point now, and I just ask that council consider to allow, ASA to sit down, the Arizona Sign Association to sit down and talk with staff and just to work out some of these concerns and issues, and before it goes clearly to council for final action or adoption. So that's really the request, and nothing more than that. And I wasn't really prepared to talk about the specifics because it's appropriate to do with staff versus here.
But I have a question, though.
Sure.
Why do we need to involve your association?
You don't have to, but the Sign Association is requesting that, and really what the Sign Association offers really is expertise in relation to not so much bigger is always better, but a lot of it is functionality, making sure things are going to work in relation to what you want it to do versus what you end up getting. So some of it is that versus, it's not all like the size of the freeway signs with the height is probably going to be okay in 99.9% of the applications given your situation. So there's a lot of good aspects of the code, but there's some that we just wanted to really sit down, talk with staff, and just see if we could get on common ground with.
Malik, are you comfortable with that?
No, we look forward to ongoing dialogue with them, and if there's any substantive changes, we'd present that to council when we bring it forward for official vote.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
If you could, maybe you know this, it seems like not the backlit sign, but the sign that has internal neon. I'm going to use the Golden Corral as an example on Grand. Okay. Those signs, typically when it rains, 3 or 4 of the letters go out. Why is that?
There's
and
a
have you guys
leak-
got that figured out?
A well-built sign will not have water coming in it. What that is it's welded. It's built with aluminum. There's a tube structure, and it's aluminum, and it wasn't well constructed. Water gets in there, and water and some of the components don't always get together so well. So, I'm just guessing. There could be something else, but
It happens a lot of places. That typical sign, the one that has the individual letter on the building.
With well-built signs, as really what you guys are seeking here, it should not happen. When you get quality products, you're not going to, you're just, it should happen less often. Because really, the industry wants to have great-looking signs, and ones that work really well, and ones that don't have, issues or problems with in relation to visibility or just functionality. So,
Because it was the Den Corral for about a week.
Den Corral.
Den Corral.
Did they get any business under that name?
Anyway.
Okay, I think that covers that. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
There's just a couple things we want to mention. This weekend is a surprise party. At 6 o'clock, we're going to have some festivities over by the stadium where we'll be lighting the Christmas tree. We'll have some hot air balloons, some skydivers, and a lot of great entertainment. The next day at 10 o'clock, I think it goes 10 to 5 or so, there'll be some more fun over by the stadium. Mr. Longabaugh has an announcement he'd like to make.
Yes, I just want to remind everyone that on Saturday between 8 in the morning and 4:45 in the evening at Valley Vista High School, there's going to be a tournament of our Roadrunner wheelchair basketball team. We've got 3 teams coming in from California, and it's a round-robin tournament. And so if you have time to come out and watch a game or two, it's exciting. And if any of you remember last year's tournament, a lot of guys ended up on the ground.
Well, they did because these are big, strong guys.
Oh, yeah.
And it's exciting basketball,
Thank you,
so
Matt.
I would encourage everybody to think about just dropping in. What's the cost to?
There's no cost.
There's
to
no
watch.
cost, so we
No.
can just come in and enjoy some basketball.
Oh, yeah.
What time? What time?
Okay.
The first game starts at 8 and the last at 4:45, so it's an all-day event.
All right.
Okay, thanks, everybody. This meeting's adjourned.
Not to exceed 125,000. That would be my motion.
Yeah,